Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of the book of Mark. Today we're in Mark chapter 12, and we're in the last 17 verses of the chapter as we consider this particular section of the final week of Jesus' ministry. In the first half of chapter 12, you have several confrontations that Jesus is going to have with various individuals, and this latter section falls on the backside of that day of conversations. He is at the temple. He is interacting with several different people. In the first two-thirds of the chapter, you have the Pharisees and the Herodians and the Sadducees and the chief priests and the elders. In this last section, you have more of an individual interaction that is taking place. For instance, when you begin in verse 28, you have one of the scribes who is going to come up to him and ask him a question. And that question is, what is the greatest commandment of all? Or what is the most important commandment of all? The interesting thing about this question is that the previous things that had been said were done to test Jesus. They were trying to get the wrong answer out of Jesus. And yet this scribe, it says verse 28, having heard them reasoning together and perceiving that Jesus had answered them well, asked this question. In other words, he's been paying attention to the discussions that were taking place, and he realizes that Jesus is answering these questions correctly. And so he wants to ask a question that is of importance to him. What is the greatest commandment of all? Jesus answers him with the statement that I'm sure most of us are very familiar with. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength. And the second is like to it, that you should love your neighbor as yourself. But it's the response of the scribe that is, to me, the most interesting thing here. Because whereas all of the other groups, when Jesus has responded, have been befuddled, or they've been angry, or they've been muttering to themselves, or this, that, and the other, this particular scribe, when Jesus answers, his response is, well said, teacher, you have spoken the truth, for there is one God, and there is no other but He. He agrees with Jesus. He is actually grateful for Jesus' answer and thankful for his answer. And he goes on to talk about it with Jesus some more. And as a matter of fact, in his discussion with Jesus, it ends with this idea that Jesus states when he says, you are actually not far from the kingdom of God. In other words, your heart is of the right nature. You're asking the right questions. You're not far from where you need to be in the kingdom of God. And it's a fascinating discussion to consider. But one of the things that it should teach us is this. There are going to be people that are interested in the truth. They are interested in what is right and what is wrong and what the right answers are in all different areas of life. And that just because most of the people in a certain segment, because he's going to talk about the scribes in just a few verses and talk about how that they are going to do things that are wrong. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about that in just a second. But just because most of those people do things like that doesn't mean that everyone falls into the same category. You can't lump everybody into the same group just because it is a general trait of people in that group. And we live in a world today where people want to lump everybody into a group. And people want to treat everybody that is in a group as the same. You can't do it. And Jesus recognized that when it came to the heart and the attitude of this scribe and the question that he asked. In the second place, I want us to drop down, and we talked about Jesus' warning concerning the scribes. And I want you to see why this warning is here, because the scribes are the ones who They were the copiers of the law. They were the ones who would make sure that the law was kept in its correct form, in transcribing it from one edition to the next edition. They knew the law inside and out because of the fact that they had written it and were so well acquainted with it. But I want you to notice Jesus' warning about the scribes in verse 38. He says, "Beware of the scribes who desire to go around in long robes, love greetings in the marketplaces, the best seats in the synagogues, and the best places at feasts." And he's going to go on and say a little bit more, but I want you to see what he's pointing out. He's not saying that they do their job poorly. He is not saying that they are dishonest or dishonorable, even though he will talk about the fact that they devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. But what he is saying is they are motivated by their desire to have high places. They are ones who are ambitious and they want premier positions. They want to move up the ladder. And so the warning here is about the fact that they will do things that will be better for them in their prestige and in moving up the ladder instead of whether or not it is specifically right or wrong to do them. Their ambition is going to take precedence above everybody else. Now, this comes, as we've already stated, on the heels of this particular scribe asking a question. Here, Jesus is talking about the scribes in general, not this one man in particular, but he tells them to beware of the scribes. He says they will receive greater condemnation. He doesn't say all scribes are like this, but he says beware of the scribes who are like this. Those that are like this, and there are many of them. You have a situation, and if you go over into Matthew chapter 23, you have Jesus there calling the scribes and the Pharisees hypocrites because they will tell the people one thing and then they will act in a different way. There is a warning here about people who live and who act and who make their choices off of ambition and off of a love for power, because it will destroy them and any who are attached to them. In the third place, in this section of Mark 12, you have at the end of the chapter the discussion of the widow. And here the discussion is about how God views our giving. You know, the widow goes in, and in this place where the treasury is at the temple, you have people coming and bringing things all day long. And many people want to make a big show of how much they give. And many people are going to come and they're going to give great amounts of money and of their wealth and of their possessions to the kingdom of God, as far as to the people of Israel at the temple, and fulfilling their responsibilities in doing so. This woman is going to come, and all she has to her name is the 2 mites, which is next to nothing. And yet she is going to give these 2 mites, instead of hoarding them for herself to get whatever she could possibly get out of them, she brings them and she gives them to God. And Jesus is going to make the statement in verse 43 that this woman has put in more than all those who have given to the treasury. I want you to understand the principle that Jesus is talking about. He's not saying give whatever you want necessarily, and especially under the Old Testament laws where there were specific amounts that were supposed to be given. But what he is saying is that God considers the heart of the giver over the amount that is being given. This woman gave all that she had. This woman gave to God first, above herself even. God is not as much concerned, and the lesson for us is God is not concerned so much about the amount. There are those who try to argue that even today we have a certain amount that you have to give. There's no New Testament edict on that. But what God is watching for is the heart. If my heart is all about me first and I give God the leftovers, I've got a problem. If my heart is about how much do I absolutely have to give and I'm not going to give a penny more, there's a problem. If my heart is giving to God out of gratitude for His blessings and thanksgiving for His promises and out of a love and a desire to serve Him, then God will be pleased with our gift and with our offering and with our thankfulness and with our love. Because if that's the motivation, we'll never be minimalists in our giving toward God. You know how I know that? Because I see the way that men give to one another when that is the motivation. The generosity of mankind toward each other when they truly love and appreciate and are thankful for the things that others have done for them and the relationship that they have with others will also show in the way that they give in their relationship to God. These are the things that I see at the end of Mark chapter 12. I pray that they are beneficial to you. We are actually going to take the entire week next week off because of the holidays, the holiday of Thanksgiving. And so we're going to take next week off from videos, but we will be back the next week to continue our study beginning in Mark chapter 13. I hope that you'll join us then. But until then, have a great day.